Hello and welcome to another segment of Elder Abuse Awareness Virtual Coalition. My name's Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking to Director of the Orange County Office for the Aged, Anne-Marie Maglione, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center on Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary College, Professor Larry Force. So Anne-Marie, would you like to start us off?
I'd be delighted. Welcome. We are taping on International Women's Day, so I would like to kind of give a shout out to all of the strong women out there that, when we talk about elder abuse, it kind of goes hand in hand, unfortunately, with sometimes with caregiving and with taking care of loved ones. And the majority of our caregivers in this country we know are women. So you are the backbone of our society, and I stand tall with each and every one of you. So thank you. Today we are doing a part 2 of a little bit of a difficult topic. And we've always promised this platform is going to be talking about all aspects, and nothing is off topic to discuss. And sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's uncomfortable, and I think this is one of them. And it's about kind of being a good Samaritan. And when you are it could be a caregiver, it could be helping a neighbor or a friend who is in need, getting older, requiring some assistance, and all of a sudden, as the person starts to age, maybe a family member comes in and starts to swoop in and is making certain accusations as to, why are you being so kind to my parent? Why are you doing this? Do you have ulterior motives? You also have the older person that maybe will start having some cognitive issues, and they're also getting confused. Like, hey, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Are you trying to take advantage of me? And there's a little bit of a paranoia there. How do you, as the Good Samaritan, the very empathetic person, then protect yourself? And it's really important to do that. So we had started that. We had some really good topics. I hope you will, if you haven't watched it, if you'll go back and look at it. And now we're going to go just a little bit deeper. So my friend and my colleague, Dr. Larry Force, you are such a great inspiration and such a valuable tool in this partnership. I wonder if you could start us off.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And thanks, Alyssa, for making this happen, weaving this together. I too would like to acknowledge International Women's Day. Aging is really, what are we looking at? It's women caring for women, and that's what we know. And we talk about, I'm teaching a psychology of aging class, as does Sharon. And the fact is that one of the things that we emphasize is what? It's caregiving is, an incredible role on so many levels, both negative and positive. And it's really, in many respects, it's women caring for women. So this is, a salute to International Women's Day. As Anne-Marie said, this is part 2. Last week we started with Tim Murphy and Sandy Altman. Tim from the adult protective side, Sandy from the legal side. Today we have Sharon Mary Cohen joining us. Today we have Dr. Jerry Abatiello joining us, okay? Adding another dimension, another part of the voice to this, because it is an interesting thing. The role of the Good Samaritan. Some people, just by nature, we talk about altruism, I'm sure that some of you have come across a car accident. And the question is, when you do, you'll notice that some people run towards it, some people stay in place, and some people run away. Is it a temperament issue? Is it a personality issue? It could be a combination of both. Well, the same thing happens in any type of situation where there's a need for presence or a need for help. Some people run towards it, some people stay in place, and some people step back. In the cases that Anne-Marie and I have talked about, and Danielle Maglione has joined us as well. And Danielle has been an essential member of this team in helping us connect this logistically. So thank you, Danielle, and welcome. So the story is that Anne-Marie and I have talked about cases, that we've heard of, that we've witnessed, that we've observed, that, professionally, personally. And what do we hear? We hear that sometimes the role of the Good Samaritan is misinterpreted. I say things to my students that are standard. And one of the things I say is that there's nothing more confusing than speaking to a confused person about confusion. You know, and the fact is that there are cases where we have witnessed that the Good Samaritan has arrived because maybe the person doesn't have anybody else. Maybe the family they're distant, both physically and emotionally. And the Good Samaritan has arrived, and all of a sudden the person's cognitive status changes. And what the Good Samaritan is saying, or the presence of the Good Samaritan, is misinterpreted by the person with cognitive deficit, or it's being misinterpreted by a family member. And then what we talked about last week is, how does that person, the Good Samaritan, protect themselves? You know, is it an adult protective service issue where they're being violated? Is it a legal issue, you know, because of the fact that their reputation is being tarnished or being, you know, looked at, you know, sideways? So I think this is, as Anne-Marie said, this is not an easy topic, but I think it's such an important topic. And with that, what I'd like to do is just start just very quickly from recapping last week. And Tim Murphy from Adult Protective Services, if you could, you know, launch us on this, just a quick snapshot. And the same thing for you, Sandy. And then I'd like to bring in Sharon and Dr. Jerry Abatiello. Please, Tim.
Adult Protective Services gets lots of calls about the scenario that you just explained, where you have an impaired adult in the community who is in need of some assistance. Others are trying to help. They think they're helping responsibly. And then a complainant steps forward. Another neighbor, a family member at a distance, you know, some other person who thinks that they have the impaired adult's best interest at heart as opposed to the other person. So Adult Protective Services gets lots of reports and referrals about that, and we are asked to sort out the situation. And then you have competing points of view. So, you know, from an APS point of view, you know, we try and take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of the impaired person and decide who's helping responsibly. And there are different levels of that responsibly. And then it is subjective rather than objective. In terms of breaking the law, you know, if you steal money from somebody, that's a larceny, you're expected to complain to the police. If you beat somebody up and hit them and hurt them, that's an assault. You're expected to complain to the police. If, you know, coercion and forgery and those other things exist, you're expected to complain to the police. But if you're impaired or ill, you can't do that. And so that's a conundrum. Nor can Adult Protective Services take any action criminally on your behalf. We can report crimes to the police or the district attorney, but unless you want to sign a complaint, nothing really is going to happen. So it is frustrating. Protections for the Good Samaritan. You know, if you are responding to an emergency where somebody's life is in peril, motor vehicle accident, you know, a severe physical injury accident, and there's no one else around, there are some Good Samaritan protections. But I tried to do some research too, along with Sandy, trying to take a look at protections for any of us that are trying to provide help for a friend, neighbor, or family member. And I didn't come up with anything in statute or in case law. So I'm going to ask Sandy that question to start chiming in about this point of view about the role of the Good Samaritan and protections or none. Sandy, you're muted, bud.
I know. Yeah, for a lawyer, that's always tough. But I also did some research on it because in our last session, I sort of stopped and thought about it. I couldn't think of anything, so I did some research. And there's a couple of things on that, but there's some kind of laws in almost every state. But what they apply for is a situation that you mentioned, which is emergency situations, because that is where you have the most urgent need for protection, because someone has to make a decision right away whether they're going to go in and help or not. And depends who they are. If they're a medical person, maybe they don't want to because they know that their license is on the line. Other people run in and help, other people run away, all of that. In New York, the main thing is about if you are overdosed, it's drug overdose, and you want to know if you should call 911 because you're also high and you don't want to get arrested, that kind of thing. And there's a protection for that. You can't be prosecuted for that, but there's nothing else. Now we're talking about situations here where it's ongoing. That is, if you're looking to help a neighbor or a friend or a family member, there's no statutory protections for that. So what we're really talking about, and I've been thinking about this, is the balance between risk and benefit. That is, if you're going in there to help someone, there's always a risk. Okay, there's a risk of being well, first of all, it's an insanely difficult job that you're taking on. So is it going to be something that is beneficial for that person you're helping? Is there a risk? Is there a risk that you're going to mess it up and be the one who's pointed at as because it's not a legal thing, but it's like, okay, my brother's taking care of my mom, but I know better, so it's that kind of risk. Then there's the risk of, oh, you're stealing her money, all this stuff. And basically it comes down to, I'm willing to help my mom because that is more important to me. She took care of me when I was a kid, and I have to take care of her. And it's a balance, and we know it's tough, and we know you can be the target of all kinds of criticism, accusations, and all that. And that's sort of where we're at. I mean, it's that inner judgment of whether it's worth it to you and worth it to that other person. Nothing much on the law.
So I think you can see from the agency perspective and from the legal perspective, there doesn't seem to be a lot of presence from both of those arenas. And then the question is, how can the person, look, all of us have one thing in common on this call. We're all advocates. We're all the people that are running towards situations when everybody else is running away. Okay, and I'm not saying that in a boastful way, but that's the reality of who we are. Think about, what we do for a living and how we do it. We're the ones that are running into the building while everybody else is running out. So I want to hear from Sharon now, from the advocate perspective. You've been in these situations, not only as a central key figure, but also witnessing it and interpreting it. And, sometimes interpretations are correct and sometimes interpretations are wrong. So Sharon, would you give voice to this?
Unmute. It's a very difficult situation when it comes down to it because it's based on perception. And I can think of one case that I was involved with that was very, very difficult. It was an elderly woman who, as a child, had been hidden from the Nazis in a convent. She actually was locked in the basement of the convent. As a result of that, a lot of her behaviors were odd as an adult. She didn't socialize well. She was fearful of people. But she functioned and she worked, and she had an older brother who she lived with. Roll forward, they're now in their 70s and 80s. The brother dies. He had been actually employed in New York in the jewelry business. He and she never spent any money. He left her a very large sum of money, plus several bags of uncut diamonds, because that's what he did. They lived in a small town in actually Ulster County, Pine Hill. Everybody in town knew her business. And it seemed like all of a sudden, she had an awful lot of friends who just wanted to assist her. Actually, she had a neighbor who was more than willing to take her into the city and to attempt to clear out the bank accounts for her. Took her to an attorney so that she could become power of attorney. And along about that time, some of the Jewish community in Fleischmann's, which is one town over and in another county, started to get very concerned and actually called APS and me, only because I had lived in Fleischmann's and I knew all of the players. So there I am trying to figure out what to do. There is APS trying to figure out where to go from here, because clearly it wasn't an issue of cognition on her part. A mental health assessment was done. She had an Article 81 hearing. They determined she didn't need a guardian, yet basically naive, basically willing to have somebody else handle her money because she didn't want to. It just was a mess.
And in your role as executive director of Jewish Family Services of Ulster County, I'm assuming that people have come to you with these types of concerns.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking is, if so, now we know that from the APS perspective, they're welcoming, but there's nothing that they can really do. From the legal perspective, they're welcoming, but it's a gray area. If a person was to, because I want to talk to Dr. Abatiello about this in a minute, about how the person themselves must feel. Because you try to do something good, and the next thing you know, this stuff is blowing back on you. And what all you try to do is be present, with good intention. And the next thing you know, you're having a conversation over here, defending yourself or defending your reputation. So the direct question is, if somebody was going through this, although you're not APS and you're not a legal system, you're an unbelievable advocate. Could somebody contact your agency or the agencies that mirror your agency to speak on their behalf?
Of course, but the problem is there's such a gray area. We don't have any power in the system. We can advocate for the individual, but the decisions are not made by the advocates. The decisions are made by the court system or the medical system.
So before we go to Dr. Abatiello, Anne-Marie, I want to ask you now, okay? Because now we know that Tim, wonderful advocate, but his agency doesn't do it. Sandy, tremendous advocate, but they're not sure. Sharon's like, yeah, come on in, but I don't know really how best to strengthen this. People come to the Office for Aging. Can they do that?
Well, I mean, they definitely can. And again, like Sandy and like Tim, legally we can we guide them, but legally we don't have any stand either. And I think another aspect of this whole thing is, we had a situation that was brought to our office where, the parent was getting older, had some money, really didn't have a lot to do with, I don't want to say estranged from their children, because their children still got their adult children still got monthly allowances of, $500 each a month. Their adult children are in their 50s now and they still get that. And all of a sudden, the parent is starting to fail. And one of the children come in to try to take care of the parent. but is doing it in an angry, kind of festering way, because Dad was never there when I was growing up. Dad was working on his career, and I was in the back seat, and I was never the priority, and he didn't come to my games, and he didn't see my plays, and I wasn't his priority, and now all of a sudden I got to make him my priority, and I'm kind of angry that I have to do that, but yet I don't want the neighbor getting what's rightfully mine because I deserve it. So we then start talking about, this is a bigger picture. I think you need to get into some counseling. You need to deal with all that. And so maybe, Jerry, maybe you can touch on that also.
And before Jerry does that, I just want to add something, build upon something that you said, which I think we could have a whole series on. What happens as a caregiver when you're expected to provide care to somebody who you didn't have a good relationship with?
Right.
You had an abusive or a violating relationship.
Right.
I was doing some consulting work at an assisted living home one day. 2 women in the room. This one woman, she's got pictures of her grandkids. Her kids are coming in and out. This other woman, nobody. So I start talking to her, and I find out that her daughter lives 3 miles away. So not taking a look at the larger picture, I immediately get on the phone, call her up, ask her if I could meet with her some evening, if she could come in, because there is a concern that, your mother doesn't have any visitors. And she comes in, and we have an hour conversation about what led up to, the stage where the mother is. And it was very clear why she wasn't coming in.
Right.
I misinterpreted it like, oh, there's something wrong with the caregiver. No, she was protecting herself, and here, there are cases where people have to provide care for people that have abused them,
right.
And the next thing you know, they're the main caregiver. So Jerry, thank you, Emery. So Jerry,
yeah, so many layers.
There are, and I think we can even talk about that, for other components. But Jerry, from your perspective, okay, Emery talks about, referring the person for counseling, how to protect themselves, because what's happening, their reputation is being eroded. It's being talked about. Somebody's saying something. Oh, did you know that they did this and they did that? When in fact, that's not why they were there. What from your perspective, Jerry is the founder and CEO of Center for Life's Journey, and a trained and experienced practitioner, both in nursing and in psychiatric nursing and in end-of-life care. So, Jerry.
I think what everybody is saying is that this is so multidimensional and multifaceted. The notion of we all operate on our own investments in things. There are people that are going to offer the help just because they're kind. And that will interrupt if you have, for those of you actually working for a community where the person, the family members start to get worried about the investment that they're losing here, even if their relationship wasn't, pardon me, too good. There are other people that start off that way and then realize this is the golden calf. My experience with people along the trajectory of their aging is they want to know someone cares, especially in this day and age when families are so distant, not only emotionally, but place-wise, environmentally and geographically. And so there are many people I have spoken to and said, what is it that you want to get out of this? And, they were going to move into the basement of someone's home. And there's a trade-off always going on in my experience, that I want to know that somebody will take care of me, and you want some sort of remuneration. Some people can go as far as, you're such a good person, and I really like you, to I need this much money. And over my career, I've seen people negotiate these things. Some of them work and some of them don't. But and I think this is an incredible area for research, because there is nothing that helps people tease out what is part of my dementia or emotional illness, and what is part of this person's taking advantage of this. And oddly enough, in my apartment complex here, there's a woman who's 97. She was started the first women's athletic team, but she's fought all her life. So recently she was ill, and she's gone through the entire aid services available in the area by being arbitrary, and as her social skills have changed. So it would be really nice if I could say this was straightforward, but the bottom line is it's not. It's very complex, and I am wondering if and there's a friend of one of my friends who is able to drive and is able to take care of herself, but she's worried about the time she can't. So she's actually seducing, if you will, a very bad choice of words, but paying the aide that comes in to clean her house 4 times the amount of money. And then when the aide realized this, she starts to invite her home. And this is supporting that she will have somebody. In the end, when the money ends, so does the caring. So, and when I mentioned that, it's probably a good idea that you pay her what your contract is. And if you want to leave her money in the end, go ahead. But the idea, oh no, she's wonderful and she's going to take care of me. Yeah, sure, until you run out of money. And now, I don't say those kinds of things, but people are very conflicted. I'm afraid of being alone. I'm going to make sure. So there's this kind of negotiation that goes on. And when something happens out of that, where I no longer have control over that, then things start to go to the agencies about what's happening here.
Jerry, when you're talking, the thing that you said, good area of research. One of the things in psychology that we use as an example is, here's this woman that goes into a therapist in 1920. And this poor, unfortunate woman has now married her 6th husband, who's alcoholic and in some form abuses her. Psychology at that point says, oh, you poor, unfortunate woman. Now she comes in 2020 with the same story. The psychological lens today is, what are you getting out of this? Why are you continuing putting yourself in those situations? It's a whole different interpretation of behavior. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at this person typically that's isolated. And we're talking about, oh, that poor person is isolated and there the Good Samaritan arrives. But another area, too extensive for today, is what is it that brought them to that point of isolation?
Right.
They probably worked really hard to be disconnected. Yeah, there are some people that were abandoned by families and systems, but there are other people that put a lot of effort in distancing themselves, either emotionally, psychologically, physically, or financially from families. So I think we could talk forever about this. This is and I think that we should continue to talk about it, not necessarily with this particular theme of the Good Samaritan, but to really launch it as another extension of this, about why is it that people are isolated? What are the psychological interpretations of it? And I think that, what we were able to bring to the table, and we do it so successfully, is the different perspectives. The government agency, the academic arena, the legal perspective, the agency, the advocacy, the counseling. It doesn't get better than this because of the fact that we have can I use the word, Jerry? Kaleidoscopic okay, because that's Jerry's trademark, you know, this kaleidoscopic perspective.
A good one.
Good one. So are there any other summary comments, contact information before we turn it over to Alyssa? Summary comments, anyone? Anne Marie first?
Can I
Please.
just finish up for 1 second? Because, you know, we're talking about it from the perspective of the elder. But you originally said, you know, people are afraid. There are some people that are afraid. Even the ministers are telling people, if they have family, do not get involved in this. And, you know, in a day-to-day basis, somebody has to get involved. And how do we protect those people who actually, you know, are doing things that are caring, bringing food, you know, listening, you know, helping them get to the doctors well before they deteriorate and start to decompensate. So, you know, I think that other side of the coin is important, because only last week, the neighbor here told me, I was told by the priest, don't get involved, she has a son. Well, the son lives on the other side of the country. And so he'll get involved, but he's not going to be a happy camper, since their relationship has changed.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
If I could just sort of chime in on the legal part, Jerry, you actually remind me of this about contractual obligations, and there's a provision really as far as Medicaid laws is concerned that you know, if you have Medicaid and you're at home, you can be helped by home care agency, but also you can have a family member help you and be paid for that from Medicaid. It's consumer directed. And in order to do that, though, you have to have a written contract. That's the only thing that Medicaid will accept, because otherwise they'll say, oh, it's just you're giving money to your kid and that can keep you from getting Medicaid and all that. And it has to be very, very specific. And it's one of those things that you know, it occurred to me in the context of this discussion that this may be a good idea. You know, if you are caregiving for a parent, it may be a good idea to have something in writing. Okay, you're caregiver, you're getting a certain amount of money for doing A, B, C, and D, and it gives a kind of structure for what you're doing. There isn't really much else, you know. A lot of it just has to do with, you know, your personal beliefs and what's important to you and what you know. I mean, you know, we talked about this briefly last time. This can take over your whole life. A lot of caregivers leave their job, take care of their parents, and you know, even if they have their own kids, and looking at this whole interaction, this whole system, you know, this is not like in other cultures where kids are expected to take care of their parents when they grow old. This doesn't happen here. And because of that, when it does happen, then you get the questions.
And I want to add to that. Sharon sent everybody a chat, everyone, you know, big societal issue. Where have all the caregivers gone?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing, because I remember being at a meeting with the Willowbrook committee years ago down in the city. And one of the advocates' parents on the Willowbrook committee said, we're going to have a shortage of hands. And I like that term, shortage of hands, because when you look at it, you know, the demographic bubble, I mean, we're out there and all of us on some level have provided presence to an aging parent. But the question is, who's going to provide presence to our demographic, because we're much larger than the one behind us. And now with this COVID issue, you know, they talk about the impact on demographics. So Sharon, in summary?
In summary, it's a societal issue we've known about that we haven't done a darn thing about. Nothing. It's a what'll we do? And it's time we stop doing the what'll we do and start taking a hard look at how to improve this. Other countries do it. We don't.
You know, I've known Sharon for over 30 years, and I love her direct, in-your-face advocacy. And she's right. You know, we have talked a good game about it. We've known this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We've known that the demographics are going to shift. And you know what? Think about this. We're the architects. How do you want, myself included, how do we want the end stage of our lives, or the latter part of our lives? You know, you, daughter-in-law, son-in-laws, but there are other people out there that are doing this absolutely alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Tim, any summary comments?
Yeah, so I agree with Sharon that we talk about this, we know it's coming. The demographic shift has occurred. There's more of us than any other time in the past. Here in New York, and probably throughout the nation, there is a presumption that we all have capacity to manage our affairs until the judge says otherwise. So if that's the baseline, and people are failing, they're becoming impaired, regardless of age, what is and what should be the societal response to those now at-risk adults? The Adult Protective Services is unique that we have to take on all comers over the age of 18. So for me, it's just not an elder problem. It's an impaired adult problem that places you at risk.
Mm-hmm.
One of our criteria for APS is no one else willing or able to help responsibly. And that's exactly what we're talking about. But who measures that responsibility, and how is it calculated or codified? And should it be? If our population continues to evolve with more and more older impaired adults, probably it should be, but I don't think anybody else is talking about it.
Good point. So before we turn it back to, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
In terms of defining it or offering potential commentary or solutions about it.
Beautiful. So before we turn it back to Alyssa, on behalf of Anne-Marie and myself, we'd like to thank you, Danielle, Sharon, Sandy, Tim, Jerry, Alyssa. And Anne-Marie, could you provide some summary comments about how people can contact you? And then Alyssa's going to bring us to the end of the discussion.
Yeah, and I want to leave on a positive note. Everything we have talked about has been tough. We knew this was happening for many, many reasons, and it's something that we have to address. Caregiving is a pretty large component of our office, and we really try to help the caregiver. I think probably when I look at the Zoom, we've all been a caregiver at least once. It's a hard, hard job. We know that. But the people and the scenarios that we're talking about today are the minority. The majority of the people are good, kind people, and they do it out of love and the goodness of their heart. And if no one saw it before, certainly this pandemic has brought out the good in all of us. And it's really, in our office, people have just called us saying, what can we do? How can we help? Where can we go? So as far as that goes, I always try to go to glass half full. I think we're going to get there. And we're always going to have the dirty underbelly that we're going to, in society, that we're going to have to deal with. And that's what we have to do.
And maybe, can I say this one thing before you give the contact information? Maybe what we have to do is set the stage and show the importance of friends. So maybe right here, with raising our right hands, we give a testimony to each other that we're going to be present for each other. We're going to care for each other. We're going to be at least aware of each other. Right. And I kid you not about that.
It's true.
The small communities. And Danielle, we're all coming to you. So get ready.
I was going to say, especially Danielle.
Danielle, so get ready. Take a look at your new client base. Anne-Marie, contact information.
If you have any concerns about any kind of aging issues, whether you're an older adult or a family member or a friend, please give us a call. Our New York Connects numbers are single point of entry, 845-615-3710. You can also view us. All of our information is on our website, www.orangecounty.gov.com. Click on Department or the first one, Aging. You can also join our Facebook page, Orange County Office for the Aging. Until tomorrow, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Alyssa?
Thank you guys so much, and thank you for joining us today. You've been listening to Elder Abuse Awareness Virtual Coalition. And if you want to hear this program again, share it with friends or leave a comment, log on to our website, www.elderabuseawarenessvirtualcoalition.com. Until next week.